So you're being asked to innovate. Well, evidence shows that companies that do reap the rewards. But those rewards are faster and bigger if you first get the culture right and your people aligned. This webinar is going to show you how to do both these things. Some introductions. My name is Julian Andrews and I'm your MC. A tip of the hat also to Kieran Woodia, who's twiddling the dials in the background. And a huge round of applause for today's presenters, Paul and Jez.
Morning, everybody.
Hello, how are you?
Okay, so we're using an online panel to communicate with you, which should now be displayed on your computer. If you can't see it, it's probably because it's minimized and sitting at the bottom of your screen. To expand it, simply click on the double arrows at the top of the panel. If you're still having trouble, you can also click on the hand icon and Kieran will jump online to assist. If at any time you want to ask a question about something we say or about Paul's funny accent, then enter it in then and there in the box at the bottom. At the end of the session, we'll make sure we answer any of these. Everything's totally confidential. The only people that see your comments or questions are the four of us in here now. So feel free to comment on what's important and ask as many questions as you need to. Now, we'll be pausing things a couple of times during the session to get your input via an online poll. When you see this slide, get ready to let your fingers do the voting. You'll only have about 10 seconds to pick your answer from our multi-choice options. And at the end of the half-hour session, we'd really love it if you could please complete a quick survey. It's only going to take a few minutes. There's only 5 questions. It helps us to understand what you took from today and what else you want to hear about. Now remember, we'll be recording this session, so there's no need to take notes. Just sit back, relax, and enjoy. All right, traditional thing to do now is to talk about the agenda. I'm not going to do that. There are 5 things in front of you. That's what we're going to talk about. Let's get straight to it. Paul.
Thanks very much, Julian. And as we're getting started, I know for many of you, this is the first time to a TakeON webinar. So let's just take a minute to give you a little bit about context about TakeON and where it fits with this subject. In fact, we think TakeON in itself is very, very innovative. It brings together a wide range of tools, resources, service and support for leaders and organisations to drive very different conversations with their teams and each other. Purposeful conversations are at the heart of changing mindsets and behaviours, and therefore the culture of an organisation. Here's a quote from a CEO 2 years after a very successful transformation journey using the TakeON system. And he said, the biggest insight I've gained through this process is that if you want to change the culture of your company, you need to change the conversation across the organisation. These types of conversations not only develop people, but at the same time enable them to address specific business challenges. Increasingly, one of those challenges is innovation, or at least building a culture that supports innovation. So innovation, where do we start? Jez?
Well, why don't we start with the big why, Paul, and why is innovation such a strategic imperative at the moment? Because it seems to be pretty much with everybody I speak to. And I think Jack Welch pretty much summed it up pretty well when he said that if the rate of change on the outside exceeds the rate of change on the inside, then the end is near. I guess he's saying that you're in trouble. And he was saying that before the rate of change really picked up like it is today. So it's not really a nice to have, it's absolutely critical. Critical to success and critical to longevity.
Absolutely, Jez. And I'm going to put down a really strong marker here. I'm going to say that in our fast-paced, integrated and globalised economy, innovation is fundamental to any organisation wishing to stay relevant, let alone be competitive. You see, I think there are very few companies that have the luxury of not innovating. For most, if they don't innovate, they will become obsolete. And I look back, for example, at a very successful training company which was offering a small number of really popular programs. And I recall asking the CEO of that company about his approach to building in new elements to their offering. And he actually said he had no interest in that because business was so good. He said, I'll innovate when we need to. A few years later, that company is really struggling. You see, the world has moved on, but the company hadn't.
And I'll tell you one thing that has moved on, Paul, and that's probably some of the people and the good people within that organisation, because you can't keep good people there. And so what is this, what is innovation? And I guess you'd be right if the first thing you thought about was products and product development. Quick glance through sort of history and you'll find some really good examples. There's a few right there right in front of you. The microwave oven, the Tetra Pak, the iPod and the jetpack at the top. Just some examples. Who'd have thought many years ago that storing milk in a cardboard box was going to be a good idea? And yet look how that's taken off. But you'd be wrong if you thought that innovation stopped at product development. In fact, Dublin, the innovation strategists, they talk about 10 types of innovation, and they talk about them being across 4 different dimensions, from finance, process, offering itself, through to the delivery of the product and the service. I'll give you a couple of examples from different ends of that scale. In the finance side, imagine where we'd be today if there was no card transactions, no electronic card transactions at the tip. From the delivery perspective, the other end of the scale, in your high street store, nowadays you'll find most of the customer service representatives walking around with an iPad around their neck where they can not only take your order, but they can process it, you can pay for it, and they'll probably have it delivered at your home before you've even got there. So it's pretty amazing stuff. Now, according to Dublin, if you're really serious about innovation, you need to be active in at least 4 or 5 of these 10 categories. So maybe this is a question for you guys, and thinking about your own organisation, and where do you think you are being innovative across these areas right now?
I love the Dublin stuff, Jez, and one of the interesting things that comes out of their research is the fact that the least valuable area of innovation is actually in product. Organisations generate more value in those other areas in and around the product. But it's probably a good time to take a moment and step back and just clarify some sort of definition about innovation. And given that we've been referencing Dublin, here's Jeff Tuff, one of the principals, and that's what he says. He says innovation is creating new value, new to our market or new to the world, and value is defined as economic value for an organisation's customers and the organisation itself. So you can see at its heart, the concept of innovation is around creating mutual value. He also makes the point that innovation doesn't have to be high cost, and it certainly doesn't have to be high risk. You see, when most of us think about innovation, I think the first things that come to mind are the big things. But that's only part of the spectrum. And again, Dublin provide this sort of framework here, where we're moving from transformational breakthroughs at one end, like, say, the desktop computer, further back on the scale to what they call adjacent innovation, where a company is leveraging something it does into a new space, maybe like developing the tablet, or down to optimizing the core, i.e. doing better with what we've already got, like maybe adding in an inbuilt camera to the notebook. But here's the thing, that successful organizations are innovating right across the spectrum. But I wonder in what proportion their innovation investment would go in each of these 3 categories of core, adjacent, and transformational.
Sounds like a good time for a poll, people. So, here's the question. How are innovation efforts typically allocated in the companies that perform best on the stock exchange? All right, now you'll see that the options appearing in front of you right now. So select one of the following. Is it roughly equal? Is it a third, core, adjacent, and transformational? Or do you think maybe that they focus on the core things, maybe another quarter or a quarter on the adjacent and the transformational? Perhaps it takes a slightly more traditional form. You've got 70% focus on the core, just 20% on the adjacent, and 10% on the transformational. Or maybe it's the other way around. 10% focus on the core, 20% on the adjacent, and the big breakthroughs, that's where that focus is, 70%. So 4 options. I'm going to close the poll shortly. 3, 2, 1. Let's see what you all think. And here's the answer.
Well, it's pretty evenly spread, isn't it? We've got 20 at the top answer, 30 for the middle 2, and 20 at the bottom. I can tell you the answer, and the technicality here is about looking at the companies that are best performing on the stock exchange. And the answer for those companies is that are best performing on the stock exchange, that they're operating in a ratio where 70% of their investment is going into core innovation around the core, 20% on adjacent, and only 10% in the transformational space. That's not to say that's the right answer for your organisation, because there's many factors impacting that. Nonetheless, what this is telling us is that an effective innovation strategy is really getting all parts of the organisation focused on innovation, from the very small things through to the larger things. But here's what I think is an even more important point, and that is simply spending more money on innovation is not the answer to creating more value. You see, when you compare the amount spent on innovation across different companies and evaluate that against the value they generated, there is in fact no real correlation. If we want to get a good return from our investment on innovation, there are two things that we need to get right first. The first one is that our innovation efforts must align with strategy. Of course, that seems very obvious, but the problem is that in many cases, the people involved are not themselves aligned with the strategy. The second is that we have to get the right culture in place. When you get these two things happening, then the return on investment from the money you do spend on innovation climbs spectacularly. So the key point here is alignment and culture. Get those right first before you start spending large amounts. That, of course, raises an immediate question, and that is, what is the type of culture that best supports innovation? You see, too often I hear leaders in companies simply saying they have a good culture without really understanding the attributes of that culture and whether they are appropriate for what the organisation is trying to achieve. What we have done here at TakeON is look across a range of research studies and applied our own knowledge of the relationships between strategy and culture. And this view here is the 7 interrelated culture attributes that we think are most important for driving an innovation culture. You might want to apply slightly different words, but let's take a couple of minutes now to explain what we mean by each of them and why we think they're important. In doing this, it's useful to consider them on the innovation spectrum, from those very small incremental innovations right through to the large transformational breakthroughs. But regardless of that spectrum, the first two I'm going to talk about are relevant right throughout. The first attribute is about the deep focus on the customer experience. Remember, innovation is about creating value between the organisation and those people it serves. Deep focus means actually going well beyond simply asking customers what they want. It's about immersing yourself in their lives and really trying to imagine the value you could create for them. Real customer centricity. Yet in many cases, we really only scratch the surface on this. Jess?
Yeah, I can give you a good example of somebody who really got that deep understanding of the customer, and that's Masterlock. It's a really good case study. Masterlock, they've been in business for about 50 years before they really started to face some strong competition, pretty much from Asia and China in particular, and they were squeezed on price and product. So what they did was, instead of just asking those regular questions and surveying customers, they observed people actually shopping for locks, and they discovered amazingly that actually people don't really care about the locks. What they really care about is what the lock is securing. Now that was a step change for them, because they started to package and produce things in very different ways. So for example, the rubber coating on the chain lock was put there so it didn't damage the bike. Yet they started to package their locks differently, so they'd almost give customers information about what this lock was good for securing. So they started to get a really good understanding of customer behavior and what they really wanted from their locks. That led to small changes to product and marketing delivery, which made a big difference to the amount of locks that they sold.
Yeah, it's a great example, Jez, and if any of you are interested in that, just go onto YouTube and search under the words Masterlock and Forrester, Forrester being the research organisation. There's a great YouTube clip in terms of talking about that little particular example. The second culture attribute that is really important is quite interesting. It's about meaningful purpose. And this may seem a little bit less obvious in terms of its relationship with innovation. But you see, purpose is about doing what's right and what is worthwhile. And at the end of the day, when we think about it, it is so much easier not to innovate. If we just keep doing the same thing as we've done before, it requires much less effort. So people have to be motivated in order to want to innovate, and purpose provides that motivation. Purpose might mean the desire to discover something new, to drive, to help others, and ambition to continue a great legacy. It's this that creates the intrinsic motivation and the passion and the energy required. So let's consider what happens when those two things come together. At the incremental end of the spectrum, the convergence of these two things, the understanding of what adds values in the lives of customers, and the motivation to do what's right and worthwhile, at least in my view, crystallises in a very high level of awareness and sensitivity that enables people to uncover those incremental gains. We're labelling this as consciousness, something that drives us to do more and to do something different. And when you have that, I really believe that incremental innovation comes much more naturally to people in your organisation. Now, the convergence of passion from purpose and deep focus on the customer experience is providing something equally important for innovation, and that is confidence. And as we go along the innovation spectrum, and as the leaps get bigger and bigger, confidence becomes hugely important, because at this end, we are battling a major barrier to innovation, and that is the consequences of failure. Take the view of Ed Catmull, the co-founder of Pixar, who has very, very strong views about this issue. He says, we tend to be so terrified to be wrong and so uncomfortable with the unknown that we often opt for safety and security over breaking new ground. In a fear-based, failure-averse culture, people will consciously or unconsciously avoid risk. They will seek instead to repeat something that is safe and that has been good enough in the past. As a result, their work will be derivative and not innovative. And of course, I guess if that was true in the case of Pixar, all we would really end up with is Toy Story number 32, not something entirely new, fresh, and different. So it's the convergence of these two attributes, deep focus on the customer experience and passion from purpose, that provides confidence. One of our TakeON business partners in Australia, Bill Ralph, talks about the importance of courage. And in this instance, it is the purpose that provides us the courage to do what's worthwhile despite the risk and despite the fear of failure. And the deep focus on the customer experience, understanding what really matters in their lives, reassures us that we're on the right path. Together, they give us confidence. So, Jez, I've explained the outside of the innovation culture framework. Do you want to complete the bits on the inside for us?
Yeah, let's have a look at what's at the heart of innovation. Now, this is my favourite bit, actually. The last three C's. It's about collaboration, change agility, and curiosity. So let's start with the collaboration piece. I guess this is just about people and teams being willing and able to come together and to work together. It's about being joined up, and it's about being connected. And the more diverse that team is, the better. Perrin and Blau, they say that the richness of perspectives needs to be celebrated, not feared. So that means we need to be encouraging them to come together, and very diverse teams. So we need to be putting the technical with the non-technical. We need to be making sure that the experienced and the fresh-faced get together, the young and the old, the Gen X and the Gen Y. That's the secret alchemy at the heart of really pushing innovation forwards. As far as change agility is concerned, that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. In my mind, innovation is change and change is innovation. So when we say change agile, what do we really mean? We're actually talking about changing mindsets, and we're talking about changing behaviors, as well as changing things like products and services. I'll give you an example. Think about supermarkets. It doesn't matter what country you're in, but think of the shift in mindset they've had around the customer in the last sort of 20, 25 years. Now, 20 years ago, if there was a customer in the store, the strong mindset was that customer needed to be served, and served well, and served quickly. Nowadays, that mindset's completely changed, because somebody one day thought, well, maybe I wonder would it work if customers actually serve themselves? And look at how many self-checkouts you've got in supermarkets all over the world now. Not even that. That's just scratching the surface. And it's just demonstrating a huge shift in mindset towards the customer around trust, around convenience, and around service. Now, the last element, or the last attribute that really drives an innovation culture is all around curiosity. Now, curiosity, that's my favorite. What does it mean? It means a strong desire to know or learn something. That's what the dictionary will tell you. And now Julian tells me that no webinar would be a good webinar without an Einstein quote. So I managed to find one, and it's even relevant. Because Einstein, he rated curiosity as his most important skill. He said, "I've got no specific talent. I am only passionately curious." In fact, we're born to be curious. But there's another thought leader there, Imogen Lee. I don't know whether you've heard of Imogen, but she came out with the quote, "What would happen if?" Actually, if I finished that quote, it was, "What would happen if Daddy?" Because Imogen is my 5-year-old niece. And Imogen asks this question all the time. In fact, it's her favourite question. And she doesn't just ask it once. She asks it over and over again. And the key thing about that is that we're born to be curious. If you ask a question in a room of 5-year-olds, every hand would probably go up. If you ask a question in a class of 10 or 11-year-olds, you'd be lucky if you get 1 or 2. And my wife reliably informs me, because she's a university lecturer, that when she asks a question, the only real question that comes back is this going to be in the exam? And that's at undergraduate level. So what's happened is society is stopping that curiosity, stopping and asking questions. So in business, the role of the leader is really about reigniting this passion for asking questions. So imagine for 1 minute then that instead of investing your hard-earned money and time and energy into bringing in external experts to teach the organization how to ask the 5 whys question, a typical Lean Six Sigma problem-solving technique, imagine if you focused all your energy on your team and encouraging them to ask the 5 what-ifs. I can guarantee you'd get a much better response. You'd get more ideas, far more innovation. So that's what an innovation culture really looks like. That's what we think. 7 key attributes. Deep focus on the customer experience at the top, deep passion for purpose underneath. That leads to consciousness and confidence, and in the middle you've got collaboration, change agility, and curiosity. Paul.
Thanks, Jez. Let's just turn briefly now to the idea of leading innovation in and around that concept. And I think you've got a question here, haven't you, Julian?
Yeah. Okay, listen, guys, let's go back to the polls. So here's my question. What is usually the first barrier to innovation? Now, it's the first, not necessarily the biggest, okay? So what are the options that we're going to put in front of you? Is it finding the ideas? Is it finding the leadership? Is it finding the money? Or is it finding the time? Okay, so think about it. Take your time. Right now's the time to press the button. We're going 3, 2, 1, closing the polls. Let's see what you had to say. There we go.
There we go. So 55% suggesting that finding the leadership is the first problem, and then 27% finding the time. So that's pretty consistent, I guess, with what we've seen elsewhere as well. And so let's just touch on that briefly. And leadership, of course, is an absolute imperative in driving anything in organisations. What leadership starts with will continue. Here are 3 key strategies that we think are important in terms of leading innovation. And the first is absolutely to develop and nurture the key culture attributes that we've just been talking about, encouraging and reinforcing those elements at every opportunity. But there are a couple of others that we just briefly want to touch on now. The second is about driving consistency and continuity, and that relates to the time issue. And the third is about consciously building capability needed within your leaders and their teams, bearing in mind that everyone can play a role in innovation. So let me talk briefly about the need for consistency and continuity, because here is the problem, and some of you have identified this. It is so easy for time on innovation to get shelved because other things are deemed to be more urgent priorities. Craig Perrin and Chris Blouth, who Jez has already referred to, reported this quote in their very excellent article summarising interviews with a whole range of business leaders. This particular leader said, "There is a tension between the requirement of fulfilling the existing product, the needs of existing customers, and hitting monthly targets and monthly budgets. It is a challenge to make sure that innovation is not something that is, well, sort of, if we've got time left on a Friday afternoon. And in my experience, the innovation most likely to occur on the Friday afternoon is certainly around the Friday evening drinks. And surely our commitment to innovation deserves much more than that. Those people that have heard me talk before and talk about culture and development, you will have heard me say that I really believe that it's not something that you can bolt on the side of business as usual. If you do that, any progress will be haphazard and the benefits are very unlikely to be sustained. It's exactly the same with innovation. Innovation efforts need to be baked into the rhythm and routine of the organisation. And Jess, that really goes to the heart of TakeON, doesn't it? Regular routines that get people working on what the organisation deems to matter most at that point in time, but which also develop their capability.
Absolutely, Paul. And so why don't we take a look now at the TakeON toolkit and how that can help shape a culture of creativity and innovation. And let's do a quick reminder for those of you who are new to TakeON. The TakeON toolkit includes two streams of modular learning themes. They're called Management Matters and Business Matters. The Management Matters stuff, that's about equipping your people managers in the core skills and competencies that you need them to have to lead the business. Innovation being a key one of those. Now that's all about capability. As far as Business Matters is concerned, that's about involving all staff in conversations designed to give everybody a voice and everybody the opportunity to share ideas about how they can improve what they do. And it's not, the critical thing is it's not just one conversation, it's not a one-off, but it's a routine conversation. And that links to what Paul was talking about consistency. Both of those streams are modular and they can also work in combination. We usually tailor programs to meet your specific needs. So whether that be change, sales, service, and of course, innovation. If we take a look at the Management Matters themes now, these are the ones that really speak innovation to us. Remember, the things that we're aiming for here is a culture of curiosity, collaboration, and customer understanding. So there's a few themes here that really scream out to me. The first one is around connecting vision and purpose. That's obviously about a deep passion for purpose. So who we are as an organization, what we stand for, what we believe in. Customer focus, as it sounds, is all around deepening your understanding of customers. So this is a Management Matters theme. So it's managers coming together to work out a much better understanding of who they are, what they want, what they need. Dealing with ambiguity is much more of a change thing. So when we haven't got all the answers, how do we still manage to make decisions and lead people? And I guess the other one that really stands out for me is value stream thinking. That's a really good theme, obviously, and links quite strongly into Lean, Six Sigma, and other continuous improvement methodologies. As far as the Business Matters things, remember this is teams coming together to talk about important stuff. For me, the three themes that I like to talk about here are Think Joined Up. That goes right to the heart of collaboration. It's about teams coming together to work better together, to understand each other more. Make It Easy is really about customers, and so how do we drive simplicity, and how do we uncomplicate things for our customers? And lastly, that theme there, Working Smarter, Not Harder, actually is a really good place to start if you're at the beginning of your innovation journey. And what I'll try and map out here is what might an innovation series look like if you were to merge those Management Matters themes and Business Matters themes together. A really good place to start would be that Business Matters theme, get the team talking about working smarter, not harder. Now the reason for that is it goes straight to the heart of one of the problems that Paul was talking about before in terms of time. So the key reason for this is so that we can find ways of saving time and effort, so it frees us up to do more innovation activity. Within a couple of weeks, we've got clients talking about what a massive difference this has made to the team. It's really quite incredible. From then on in, you've got a series of manager themes followed by Business Matters team themes. And you can see how they link together. So customer focus at a manager level, followed up with understanding our customers at a team level. Value stream thinking, followed by Think Joined Up. It sort of makes sense, and they complement each other really, really well. After, what you see here is probably a 6 to 8 month series, and at the end of that, the teams come back together and they talk about, right, well, what's changed? What sort of a difference have we actually made? The final question that's probably on your mind is what sort of a difference can we make? Well, here's just a series of results from a whole host of different organisations, different parts of the world, different industries. There's only 6 results on there, but even within those 6, we've got global high street banks, we've got Asian financial services organisations, a global insurer, we've got an energy retailer, we've got a UK retailer in there, and these are just some of the results that they've got. I guess in summary, for me, there's 4 key points that I really want to get across. And the first one is that hopefully what you've got out of this webinar is that if you don't front foot innovation, you'll probably end up on the back foot of change. The second thing is that innovation is all-encompassing, and we need to involve everybody in the organisation. It's everybody's job to be innovative. Culture is key, and it's not, and I don't just mean a good culture, I mean the right culture. Fourthly, for us, it's about embedding innovation. And Paul used that term, and I think it's really, really apt, and that's about baking it into the rhythm and the routine of the business. The TakeON Toolkit is exactly what that's about. So, Paul.
Well, Julian, actually, I think I'm going to talk about what's next.
Go on,
Yeah, listen, I'd just like to say thanks to both of you. We've kind of reached the end of the pre-written part of our seminar. Thanks to you both for your insights. Props to Kieran for doing such a great job, and thanks to you, our audience, for your time. What happens next? Well, we want you to ask your questions. So start typing if you've got one. I see that Christian's just put in one that's going to take me quite a long time to write up on the board, so thanks for that one, mate. We're going to stay online to give you the answers for the next 5 minutes, but in the meantime, if you do have to go, normally this is when we tell you about the free management tool we're making available. But this time we've tried to mix things up a little. We'd like to personalize the tool to the biggest work issue that each of you is facing right now. How have we done that? Well, we've done something really cunning, and we've asked you to choose that issue from the multi-choice list that we've included in the survey. So that gives you another reason to go in and enter, and answer those 5 questions. Now, you guys are going to receive an email in the next few days with a link to the recording of the session. We'd love it if you could share it with colleagues, friends, and anyone else that you know would benefit from this. And then remember, there's TakeOn.biz, the one-stop shop for everything that you need to know about this particular product. Okay, here you can get a list of all of the themes and an explanation of what each one of them are. Here you can find the TakeOn partners who are in your local area, all of that kind of stuff. And if you want to see what the conversations that we're having are like, then think about joining our LinkedIn group. Okay, that'll keep you up to date with the latest developments. The details are up there on the screen, and we'll also send a link in the email that we're going to be sending through. So let's get back to Christian's question. Here it comes. Okay, so what he wants to know is, do we have any suggestions for how we can justify the innovative efforts if they're not going to make a direct impact on the bottom line?
Jez is looking at me for that one. I guess that's my economics background. It's a really good question, Christian. And, the interesting thing that I learned recently is that 95% of R&D investment, which is only really one proportion of innovation, fails to return its capital. So CFOs are scratching their heads and looking at how do we really justify a lot of investment in innovation. And I guess part of that is the reason that they haven't got the foundations in place in the organisation that we already talked about, which is culture and strategic alignment. Having said that, the whole journey of innovation does create a lot of intangible value, and there are many organisations who are prepared to invest in research and development purely because they know it's going to allow them to learn as an organisation. And although they can't quantify that immediately, they know that's important in terms of continuity and sustainability as an organisation. Big question. That's a start in terms of an answer.
Hey, listen, we've got another question here, this time from Craig Brady. It's another long one. What is it about you Brits and wanting to write really long questions? Okay, so he's playing devil's advocate, but what do you do with staff that refuse to take on the changes that you're trying to implement across your business, no matter how hard you try to align their heads and hearts to the program? Cheers.
Good question, Craig. So there's a couple of things I'll talk about there, and I guess the first thing is any organisation, you've got the top and the bottom of the circle, you've got your stars and you've got your cynics. So the first thing that we try and sort of encourage at TakeON is about focusing on the top half rather than the bottom half of that circle, and focus on your stars. And all of a sudden, you know, you get a little bit of traction with them, and it becomes a little bit unpopular at the bottom half of the circle. So that's one piece of advice. But the other piece of advice is probably linking back to that model in terms of the 7 attributes. And what may well be missing from that group of people is about passion, purpose. Yeah, and so that's where I put my focus in terms of reinforcing that. Who are we as an organisation? What are we aiming for? And make sure and try and get everybody aligned around that purpose.
I think you're right, Jess. I think it's often a case of working with the individual to understand what motivates them and what matters to them. That can be a tough conversation at times, but a very important one to have with those sort of individuals. What matters to them in terms of their life experience and in terms of the role that they're playing in work.
All right, just time for one more question, people, and thanks for staying on. Listen, this one's from James Donovan, and what he wants to know about is basically how is TakeON compatible with Lean Six Sigma, you know, or are they in some way in conflict?
No, I don't think they're in conflict at all. I think it's almost like a mirror image. You know, when we talk about innovation at that incremental level, it's a very blurry boundary between that and continuous improvement, which is really what Lean and Six Sigma are about. They are about reducing waste and driving consistency and changing processes in order to do that. Incremental investment is also about adding new value, but with a slightly stronger forward-looking mindset. And actually, I think one of the simplest ways to maybe talk about that, the difference between the two, is the mindset. And Lean Six Sigma is very much around change. Innovation is about what we want to create. Two sides of the same coin in many ways.
Yeah, and I'd add to that. Actually, I think they're quite complementary as opposed to being in conflict. In fact, lots of the TakeON themes actually use some tools and methodologies that you'd see in Lean and Six Sigma. They're obviously made a little bit more accessible for the general audience, but actually a lot of them are based on exactly the same methodology.
Absolutely.
Boys, the questions are keep flowing in. So here's another one. This one's from Steve Buick. And what he wants to know is how do we ensure that innovation meets the actual needs of the customers and potential customers? There are plenty of good ideas which just don't fly, such as Betamax or, you know, VHS in comparison with each other.
Yep. Good to have you on board, Steve. Good question. And I guess the key point about that, there is always risk involved in innovation. And some of the stuff is never going to fly. You're taking a little bit of a punt. But as we talked about earlier, you know, the better that you can really understand the customer experience, the more likely you are in order to actually drive an outcome which is actually going to be meaningful and relevant to the customer. So it's probably putting a little bit more focus at that point. And as we talked about during the webinar earlier on, I think, you know, far too many companies are paying lip service to that. We might be going out and getting customer feedback in terms of what they currently want or think they want or what they like and what they're not liking in terms of what we're offering, but we're not going the next stage in terms of really immersing ourselves in the journey and the lives of those customers to understand what it feels like.
Yeah, and I'd add to that, Steve, that going back to that model again about the 7 attributes, it's about confidence and confidence to know that not everything is going to hit the mark. And if you're operating right at that breakthrough sort of end of the continuum, then a part of confidence is being confident in the knowledge that not everything's going to succeed.
Yeah, no, I think Ed Catmull, he made another comment in and around that there's a paradigm or a view that mistakes are a sort of and failure is a necessary evil on the journey of improvement and innovation. And what he actually says, it's not a necessary evil, it's a natural part of the process, that we're not going to get everything right. And we actually need to really embrace that idea of failure and fail fast and improve quickly.
I think interesting, guys, you know, just to bring my own perspective into it, from a popular culture point of view, Pixar have just announced their next movie, and it isn't Toy Story 32. They've just shown some graphics on one of the websites that is I think it's called Into the Air, which is obviously a brand new concept from an animation point of view, but they're constantly going out there and they're trying new things. Doesn't always work, but you've got to applaud their efforts. All right, listen, it's been fantastic having you guys. Hopefully it's a good start to your day, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of it. Thanks a lot for attending, and remember, we've got in 2 weeks' time only another webinar. That one's an introduction to TakeON, and we'll be keeping these going. You find out all about that kind of stuff at takeon.biz. So in the meantime, it's goodbye from me.
And Steve, if you're still there, the big question is, how did Danny Cipriati actually make the touring party for the England rugby team? That's the big question in this part of the world.
Good night, everybody.
And it's goodbye from them. Cheers.